Hello, runners, and welcome to our chat today. We are talking about dynamic warm-ups for race day, and we have our friends from HSS with us here today in the form of Dr. James Robinson, who is going to be talking to us about all things stretching, warming up, and maybe answering some of your questions too. So welcome, James.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you here. This is one of the most popular topics we get as coach and staff, and so having an expert in-house, we're just going to keep you, is what I'm saying. After today's chat, we're just going to get you a desk and keep you in New York Road Runners because as runners and as coaches, we know stretching is so essential. And there are some sort of do's and don'ts that we're going to talk about today, when you should stretch, what that stretching should look like. And we're going to talk about for race day because we have the RBC Brooklyn Half coming up on Saturday, which is really exciting. So we're going to talk about, is this information useful for that race? And what you can do in the future too. So a lot of good stuff. And as runners, these chats are always for you. So if you have anything you want to talk about with James here, Hospital for Special Surgery experts are always able to answer a wide array of questions. But yeah, and especially your stretching questions. So let's kick it off. Let's talk about dynamic stretching and why it's important for runners to do before a race. So let's talk about what is dynamic stretching. Let's start with that.
So dynamic stretching is a movement-based stretch. So, you know, the old days of like sitting and holding a position for 20, 30 seconds, that's called static stretching. And we've really moved away from that a lot, especially before activity, that it's not really all that beneficial. And actually there are some studies that may show that it's even a little harmful and it may actually predispose to injury. And so now we've moved more towards a dynamic stretching. With dynamic stretching is a functional kind of movement that you do, but also loosens your muscles up. So, you know, like I think we've all seen the swimmers before their gold medal race sitting there with flopping their arms around. That is a dynamic stretch. It's getting their muscles moving, getting them warmed up that way. They're not sitting there and holding the same position for like 30, 45 seconds.
Yeah, no, and I think, you know, I'm so glad that we're back in a new heyday, because I think if you were a child of the 90s or 2000s, you remember being in a team, circled up, counting to 20, clapping at the end, and then switching to another body part. And we were joking before, no one ever felt really primed for sports performance after a static stretch circle. And so that is what it's not. Sometimes it's helpful to say, like, it's not holding a body part in a strange position for a very long time. To stretch that muscle, it's a range of motion and it's a movement. Let's talk about how dynamic stretching can help with performance, especially before something like a race or even just a run. What does it do for our bodies and how does it help us with our performance?
Yeah, so I mean, for any muscle, you've got to kind of get it ready to exercise. You've got to get it ready to start moving so you can maximize its performance. And you know, so for long races, especially if you're not trying to PR or some people use the first mile or two to kind of warm up. They go at a slower pace and everything. But if you're really trying to PR, you don't want to use the first mile or two to warm up. You want to be at your maximum performance at the start. And so certainly you can do some light jogging and pre-warming up. That is a form of dynamic stretching, trying to do a little bit of the exercise that you're about to do at a slower pace, not as much. But you also want to warm up those same muscles. So when we talk about running, you know, you're mostly talking about hamstring, calves, glutes. So you want to warm up those muscles. So things like doing little mini squats, maybe even some mini lunges, those kind of things. Those really help loosen up those muscles, get them moving, get blood flow in there, get them ready to start exercising. So that way, when you start putting them at their maximum performance, they're a little bit used to it. In that way, hopefully you decrease the chance that it's going to strain or tear.
Yeah, I love this because as a track athlete, you know, you would see for the 100-meter runners, they're going out and they have to be at, you know, almost max speed immediately, right? There's no room for warming up in a 100-meter sprint. And so you'd see in the hour before doing these very explosive dynamic warm-ups, right? Because that is the needs of a track runner. For our half marathoners and our marathoners, it can be more gentle and it can be less explosive. You don't need to be, you know, the frog feels like a very popular sprinter one where you jump in the air and there's all these like very propulsion movements. What we're talking about is what I sometimes call like the Ministry of Silly Walks by Monty Python. It's like a little bit more relaxed, but it is super important for performance. So let's talk about our runners. I was just at the Brooklyn pre-party down on Pier 2, and a lot of runners were coming up to me. And we have this interesting system where you have to get into a corral, right? So runners want to know, should they warm up before they get into the corral, after they get in the corral? Corrals close about 20 minutes before the horn goes off. So there's these 20 minutes. So what is your advice for runners? What should they do before they get in the corral? And then leading into that, what should they do after they're in the corral to stay warmed up and primed for performance?
Yes, so I mean, so the corrals offer a unique challenge because you're packed in with a lot of people, so you don't have a lot of room to do dynamic stretching when you're talking about moving. And so usually you're more the bigger movements that you want to do before you get into the corral. So if you're doing like walking on your toes or doing some heel walks to kind of warm up those calves, if you're doing a dynamic hamstring stretch, which is where you kind of kick your leg out and then touch your toes, but you don't hold it there and then you move to the other side. Those are kind of things you can't really do in a crowded corral because you're going to kick people and you don't want to do that. So, but like things that you can do inside the corral, you can do calf raises. So, you can just go up on your toes, do some calf raises. You can do some hip flexors in and out, warm up those hip flexors. Mini squats, you can do those in the corral. Definitely also runners sometimes forget to warm up their upper body, but your upper body's moving just as much, every time your leg moves, your arm moves. So you want to warm up those shoulders, do some shoulder rolls. You want to warm up your neck. Runners get a lot of tightness in their neck. And, especially these long races, sometimes they'll even get some nerve symptoms down their arm and stuff. So warming up the neck, doing some head rolls, things like that, that's all can be done in the corral pretty easily.
Yeah, no, I love that too. I think a lot of runners hold a lot of tension in their jaws. And it's like, no one, we're all stretching our calves and no one's thinking about how, we're like gripping inside our jaws and our shoulders are like up in our ears with anxiety. So it's a really great point, like rolling that neck out, shoulder rolls, getting your whole trunk and torso limber as well. Let's talk a little bit about dosage, which is another question we get a lot from runners. When I say dosage, I mean, how much time should they be doing this for? To what intensity should they be feeling with this? And how do they know if they're doing it right, and maybe how do they know if they're doing it wrong? So let's start with like time that they should be spending doing something like this.
Yeah, I think for the majority of people, 5 to 10 minutes kind of before is enough time to kind of warm up your muscles. Now, if, you have known problems, let's say, you have tight hamstrings, you may want to spend a little bit more time on your hamstrings and get those warmed up a little bit more. Or like that, if you have some low back issues, you may want to spend a little bit more time warming your back up and things. But usually 5 to 10 minutes. With any type of stretch, I tell people you should go to the point of pain where you feel that stretch, but never try to push past pain. Never try. Before the race is not the time to get your hamstring flexibility back. That's just not the time to do that. So you run the risk of injuring the muscle if you overstretch it. And then also, especially when we're talking about long distance, you don't want to fatigue either. You don't want to do too much stressing and then you're fatiguing your muscles. So definitely you have to kind of find that happy medium. You want to get your heart rate up a little bit, but you don't want to be like out of breath. You don't want to be like pouring sweat. That means you're doing a little bit too much.
Yeah, I think that's, we always say that, for running, you can't cram training. Like there's no like cramming training into the last week. You can't do a track workout that's going to help you physiologically like on race day. And I think that's a really great point about dynamic stretching. You can't dynamic stretch in the corral in a way that will like functionally change your body structure or any sort of, flexibility you have, but it will optimize performance. It can, there's a lot of caveating this because we are expecting a little bit of heat in the 90s on race day. So we're about to talk about how this can change based on temperature. But a dynamic warm-up can help you sort of get into your second flow of running, and it can increase the heart rate. There's a lot of benefits to this. It's not just that you have an increased range of motion, but your heart rate can get up. And there are benefits to dynamic stretching. Also about, is there anything that involves injury reduction with dynamic stretching?
Yeah, so that's always a question, and that's, the philosophy in the medical community on stretching has gone back and forth through over the years, and you'll get one study that says, oh, static stretching is bad. Oh, and then it's like, nobody should static stretch. And then you'll get one that says, oh, dynamic stretching is bad. Oh, you shouldn't do dynamic stretching. But I think that the data would show that probably dynamic stretching is the best stretch for both performance and for injury reduction. Now, certainly there are other type of stretching programs that you do as a training program, certainly not something you do before you get in a corral, but something you do, 6 months, 7 months before your race that are definitely shown to prevent injuries. Those are things like people are probably familiar with like Nordic hamstring exercises. Those have definitely been shown to prevent or decrease the hamstring strains, but that's not something you can do on race day. That's something you're doing 6, 7 months before, getting your hamstrings loose and ready for that.
Yeah, so what we're talking about is priming muscles, increasing your heart rate, and some gentle range of motion up in this. So let's talk about heat. Because this is a friend we have right now. It is around it's going to be 70s today and tomorrow, and then it's going to jump to the 90s. How does your dynamic warm-up change based on heat or humid environments?
So especially with heat, heat is going to bring more blood flow into your muscles. It's going to kind of warm them up a little bit on its own. So you may not need as much of a dynamic stretch. And then the big thing with heat, though, is you remember that, you're going to be racing for a long period of time. You're going to be out in the elements. You're going to be in the heat. You're going to be in the sun. The longer you spend that time before the race, that just adds to that. And so you definitely don't want to dehydrate yourself doing a dynamic stretch out in the middle of the sun. So find a shady area to do some stretching. But like you may notice in the heat, you may not need to do as much because your muscles are already loose. Versus when you're, kind of in the middle of like winter, you may need to do more of a warm up because your muscles are kind of tight and they're not getting as much blood flow. So you may need to do a little bit more of a warm up in cold. We always kind of say the mantra is heat before, ice after. That's always what we say is the best thing for muscles. So, you do get some benefit from just having the heat outside, but it also has its negatives because, it dehydrates you and sun exposure and things like that. And also when it's very humid, your body cannot cool itself down as easily. So the main way our bodies cool down is with sweat and through evaporation, and that's what cools it down. When there's a lot of moisture in the air, that sweat doesn't evaporate as efficiently, and then therefore you can't cool your core temperature down as much. And that's why people tend to get, actually humidity is actually more of a risk factor for heat exhaustion than pure temperature.
Yeah, and that's why temperature is just one of the pieces that goes into a race day plan. That humidity we've all been in it. When you're out there running and it's hot, but it's dry, and you can like sweat and it's uncomfortable, but you're fine. And then humidity really is that feeling if you're like, oh, I'm in a swamp and I am a member of this swamp. I'm just in the swamp and I cannot regulate my body temperature. And it's because your body's actually having a harder time cooling itself. So as we always say, runners, be your own best advocate. That means on your race plan. That means pulling back on pace if you need to. That means stopping at water stations. And that means especially for something like dynamic stretching, I always think there's this phenomenon where folks get in the corral and they start looking around and they start seeing what is everyone else doing. And it's hard. I've been in so many races. It is so hard to not want to replicate what someone else is doing because you're like, well, that looks like they look legit. I don't know if it's like they've got the cool goggles, the glasses, or if they've got like the new shoes or they just look like a runner. I'm going to put that in really loose quotes there. But we always say be your own best advocate, which means do what you know works and choose dynamic motion that feels nice and relaxed and it's like appropriate for you. But let's actually unpack this a little bit. I love dynamic stretching. I'm a super fan of dynamic stretching. I'm like an advocate. I think it's great for mobility. I think if you do it long term, you can have some benefits to balance and all sorts of strengthening of ankle muscles. But for runners who have never done dynamic stretching before, we've got a race day on Saturday. What should they do with some of the information that we shared? Should they try to implement it right now? Should they save it for later? How do you think someone who's never done a dynamic stretch program should integrate this into their training?
So when I usually talk to my runners, I usually don't recommend that they do anything different on race day that they haven't already prepared for. So you want to race the same way that you've done all your long runs and all your preps. You don't want to eat anything different. You don't want to drink anything different. You want to know how your body's going to react. Now, that being said, a simple dynamic stretch is probably not harmful in any way and definitely something you could incorporate a little bit, but you want to make sure, one, that they're moves that you are comfortable doing because some of these dynamic stretching moves are advanced and they require a lot of balance and they require a lot of strength, and so obviously you don't want to hurt yourself by rolling an ankle or falling down doing these things. So, but like things like mini squats, everybody can kind of do a little mini squat. That's fine to do. Calf raises, everybody can do that. That's kind of fine to do. You can kind of incorporate some of that stuff. But again, if your muscles aren't used to doing that, that's something new for your muscles. And incorporating something new into your muscles on a race day, you don't know how they're going to react. And so I usually would, I usually like to try things beforehand and make sure that you tolerate it well before you go out and do it on race day.
That's why we like having you on, James, because if you were like, try a big, robust program, we would have been like, no. But that's why we love our friends at HSS, because we all have this like this training mindset, which is nothing new on race day, and try, small integration of motions and see how it feels. Let's talk about, runners have run their race and they're interested in getting an optimal performance in the future. What would your recommendations be for putting dynamic warm-ups into the training plan? Is it before every run? Is it before workouts? Is it before races? When do you think they should be doing this to get the benefits of it?
So, I mean, dynamic stretching you can do every day. I mean, it's just something you can it's just great for functional movement, but especially before runs and workouts, especially if you're doing like a higher intensity workout, like a HIIT type training or something like that, you definitely want to get your your muscles warmed up for something like that. And most of those kind of courses, you'll see they do like some type of dynamic stretching before because they've kind of learned that. And then, we talked a little bit about the static stretching, and static stretching absolutely, I think, has a place. And I think it has a place in your normal regimen. So when you work out, muscles contract, and so muscles shorten. And so at some point in time, you need to lengthen them back out, and that's what static stretching is good at. And so I typically recommend static stretching a little bit after, just some mild, but especially on off days. When you're doing your off days, that's the days you want to do like a really good static stretching program, a yoga type program, things like that, that really help lengthen those muscles back out that you've been working and contracting and shortening during all your workouts.
Now I have a question. I'm going to throw at you. So it's not like it's not a zinger. I think you can do it. But we have a lot of folks who sit at a desk all day and then they come out and run. And this is the pain patterns of tight hip flexors. There's a lot of things that happen. I'm really curious what your thoughts are on implementing a stretching routine, either dynamic or static, for folks who are sitting hips flexed all day and then are runners and sort of experiencing pain. Would this be something that could help them be healthier?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, one of the worst things we can do is sit. That's just one of the worst things that we can do for our bodies is just sit all day. And so, get up and move. Like even if you're at your desk, you can still work, stand up, like do a little standing up, kind of just move around your desk. Or like when you're going to the bathroom, come back from the desk, do a little movement, do a little calf raises. Especially when you're sitting all day, you get all this tension in your upper body. And so doing some head rolls, doing kind of like some swimmers or moving your shoulders around, you may look weird in the office and people may think you're a little odd, but you'll feel better and your muscles will be better because of it. And then maybe when you're not in pain, and they'll start doing the same things and copying you. But definitely, I think everybody should dynamic stretch every day. That's just my personal opinion. It should be part of your normal movement pattern and getting movement. And then I like to incorporate static stretching, 2 or 3 times a week. Now, if you're really trying to link, let's say somebody has told you have tight hamstrings and you need to loosen them up. In order to lengthen muscles and keep that, you really have to do static stretching 5 to 6 days a week. It's something that you just have to pretty much do every day. But that's a good thing to do in the evening, kind of before you go to bed, or again after exercise. I'm not a big fan of doing static stretching before exercise.
And I'd love for you to share a little bit about, James, who you think is the sort of person, because I think that we all have like dance instructors from 1993, or a person who is like, you have tight hamstrings. Who are the sort of people we should go to give us this information that can help us optimize health and performance? Tell us a little bit about like what you would do at HSS, or just even how you would know you would have tight hamstrings. Because I think a lot of runners are like, I have tight hamstrings. And I'm like, I think somebody told you that once and now it lives rent free in your head. How do you actually know if that's something that you need to invest in?
Yeah, so the way I like to test hamstrings is, so I like for people to lay on their back, and then they flex their hips to 90 degrees, and then they try to straighten their knee out, and they see how far they can go, and then that really takes out the other things. Because when you talk about like just bending over and touching your toes, that incorporates so many more muscles than your hamstrings. If you have a tight lumbar spine, you're not going to be able to bend your toe over and touch your toes. That has nothing to do with your hamstrings. Your hamstrings maybe, so that kind of that move kind of isolates and you should be able to get pretty much to 0. And if you so you should be able to get your leg pretty straight. If you can't, and then you may have tight hamstrings. But especially if you're like bent and this is as far as you can go, then you definitely have tight hamstrings. Now, is that a problem? We don't really know. Like if you take Olympic track sprinters, they all have tight hamstrings because that's what makes them be able to sprint really well. So I think for various athletes it can be a problem, but for some people it's normal. And so if you have tight hamstrings and you're not having any pain and you don't have a lot of injuries, then don't worry about it. But if let's say that someone tells you have tight hamstrings and you have a lot of hamstring pain, or you have a lot of pain, IT band issues or glute issues that can also be, the hamstrings can contribute to those, then that may be something you want to work on through a static stretching program. And then also incorporating a dynamic stretching program, because again, there is flexibility in a muscle when it's not moving, and then there's flexibility in a muscle when it's moving. And those are not always the same. It's this whole concept of flat feet or pronation, the whole, like, it's normal for people to pronate when they run. Like, your midfoot moves, it's a shock absorber, it's the way your body's designed, it's the reason we can run on 2 feet and not run on 4. But, like now if you have a fixed pronated foot where you can't, it's normally, so that's very different. And muscles are the same way. You may have good flexibility in a static position, but then flexibility-wise, when you incorporate functional movement, you may be actually pretty tight.
James is my favorite person at HSS right now. We're going to do a show called Mythbusters, and we're going to go through common running myths soon. I'm going to launch it. You'll be on my podcast. We'll be fine. No, this is so true. I think that folks are like, I have tight hamstrings, and I actually have a hard time getting to the, that sort of beautiful L where you bring your feet up. But I was also a mid-distance runner. And so it was, which is about a mile in length, and that's actually my preferred distance. And so for me, being injury-free, that was completely fine. But for other runners, if there are symptoms, if they're feeling pain patterns and they can't get out of pain, it might be something to consider. But don't go considering it just because somebody on the street told you to consider it, right? I think the myth that we all have to touch our toes all the time has been debunked. If that is not how you move and you're not in pain, that's completely fine. I once had a yoga teacher that said nobody's obituary will say they touched their toes, which is the point that it's not a celebration because you can touch your toes. Everyone's got different structural, just their bodies are built differently, and our muscles, our legs are different lengths. It's a whole thing. So you do you, be your own advocate. All right, so we're gonna get into some questions, James. I don't even know what's gonna come. It's gonna be exciting. We're gonna get some whiz bangers, but before we do, I do want to thank our friends at HSS. We have 2 really awesome things happening at this race. One are these amazing HSS recovery bags. And I don't know what we would do without the HSS recovery bags because they're hefty and they're full of amazing products. We've got Gatorades, we've got Flow Water. They're fantastic. You throw them on your back. And it's everything for fueling right after a race that you need, especially on a hot day. We're going to take care of you, and HSS is there to provide. And James, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the HSS recovery zone at the finish line, what runners can expect there. You might be there?
Yeah,
is this true? Rumor's true?
Yeah, so I'll be there. We'll have some of our physical therapists and some of our strength and conditioning, and they'll be just there to kind of help show you kind of how to recover, help you, if you are having some problems, maybe help you stretch, but, talk to you about, okay, this is what you need to do. This is how you help your muscles recover so that you can be at your peak performance. And then obviously if anything's hurting, we're there to kind of look at it and take a look at it as well and kind of help give you some advice and tell you what you might need to do if you need to go actually, go in and see somebody, or if it's something that you can maybe take care of at home. And that's always important because, as runners, we like to run. And so we want to get back to running as soon as possible. So, our running doesn't end at race day. And so it's always like, oh, well, when can I run again? And again, I think a lot of that depends on your body and how used you are to running. Certainly like our professional runners that, they don't ever take time. They rarely take time off. They run a marathon and then they're training, very quickly after. But if this is your first half marathon, yeah, you probably don't need to run the next day. You may need to take some time off. Also, if you've been having some pain, let's say your IT band has been bothering you, well, now's the time to take some time off and let it rest and then get back into it. So that's so variable and it's individual, and so we can kind of help you with some of those questions.
Oh, I love this. The HSS Recovery Zone at Coney Island. You're going to cross the finish line. You're going to get your medal. You'll get a recovery bag. Go check them out in the recovery zone. This is the part where you can ask all those questions that we as runners we talk to each other a lot and we don't talk to the professionals. And we're all like, I got this thing in my knee. I'm just going to see if I can run on it. And it's like, these are the people you can say, like, I'm feeling this thing, and they can flag it for you, right? And they can say, oh, both your glutes are sore after 13 miles. Well, that's probably because you just ran a half marathon, right? Or they can say, actually, we do recommend, you go talk to someone or see someone, or here's what you can do in the interim. So this is like a super, super amazing service. So don't hesitate. I know you're going to be a little tired, but don't hesitate to take advantage of it, especially if you want to optimize recovery post-race, or you just want to ask experts questions about running. This is the opportunity to do it at the finish area in the recovery zone. So James will be there. Super exciting. Runners, check it out. All right, so I believe we have some questions, so we're going to get to them. They're going to pop up. Here we go. All right, so Sam asks, how much stretching and warming up would you recommend in the weeks or days before the race?
So actually, you know, most of the most important things you do on race day actually happen the few days before the race, and that's and because you're optimizing your body. So definitely, this is the time you really want to work on your dynamic stretching, getting your muscles loosened up. You know, static stretching can help incorporate, loosen up some of those tight things before your race. Especially, we've already talked about the heat, but hydration happens now. It's Thursday. Now is when hydration happens. You know, you need to be hydrating well, you know, drinking lots of water, getting lots of hydrating, staying away from things like caffeine and alcohol that tend to dehydrate you, you know, before your race, because, you know, there's only so much hydration you can do on race day. And if you're already behind the curve, you know, it's hard to catch back up.
And I'm going to jump in here for a second. Let's talk a little bit about hydration and what dehydration does to your muscles. Would you mind? We're going to tangent here because I think runners think, oh, I'm dehydrated, I'm feeling the symptom, but it actually has effect on how your muscles work. Can you share a little bit about why hydration is so important for body function and performance?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, one thing is you need blood volume. So when your muscles are contracting, they need oxygen. The only way they get oxygen is through blood. So if you're dehydrated and your blood volume is not at its maximum, then you're not getting the necessary blood flow into your muscles, and certainly it can cause decreased performance. And then over time, we know that dehydration and muscle fatigue can lead to cramping. And then, you know, once a muscle starts to cramp, it can be very difficult, you know, to continue to be able to race or exercise because it's just the muscle's fatigued, and every time you go to contract it, it cramps again. So it's important to stay well hydrated. Electrolytes are important as well, especially for these long distances. You know, when you're out there a couple hours, 3 hours, you need some electrolyte replenishment because when you sweat, you're losing salt, and so you've got to replete that. Now, if you're doing short distances, you know, if you're doing like 3 miles or something, you probably don't need an electrolyte. You can probably just use some water. But for these longer distance races, you really need some electrolyte to kind of help replenish that. So finding the one that works for you, the one that works best with your GI system and doesn't cause too much upset is optimal.
Yeah, and that's one of those things, runners, super individual to you. Hopefully you've been practicing in the days ahead, as James, hit the nail on the head with. It's one of those things that, if on race day you're trying to figure out your hydration and your stretching and your race plan, it's a little late for a lot of that. So even something like today, thinking about your race plan in this heat, thinking about how you can be warmed up and moving in the corral with gentle stretching and gentle movement. And then please have a water bottle in your hand right now as we speak. We will wait for you to go fill up that water bottle. I'm just joking. We're not going to do that. But super important, especially as the weather is going to take a bit of a hot turn.
And one thing, I get a lot of questions about how do you know when you're well hydrated? How do you know when you're hydrating enough? And it's a very simple thing. You look at your urine, and if your urine is clear to a pale yellow, that's probably good. If you're urinating and it's dark yellow or brown, you need to drink some more water.
We love talking about pee as coaches and doctors, but it's actually your body's function. Like it is a way that you know, and it's your body telling you. So super important. So take a look, and then maybe drink some more water on that. Probably do. Most of us are. I'd say many of us are not hydrated, especially as the weather gets warm. And I know I always am a little underhydrated. All right. Do we have any more questions? Yeah. Let's see what we got here. All right. Amber says, any recommendations for dealing with foot pain? Morton's neuroma before Saturday.
Yeah, so that can be a tough one. A forefoot pain can be a common problem with runners because it's taking a lot of pounding and things like that. So sometimes putting a little extra padding in your shoe, you can get these metatarsal pads like the gel pads and things like that can take some of the shock absorption away. I'm not a huge fan of pre-medicating. So, some people are like, I'm just going to pop a bunch of Aleve before I go run, and then I'm going to run through the pain. One, that your body's pain is your body's way of telling you that, you're doing something wrong. And so if you're masking some of that, you may not get that full feedback, and you may do damage. And then also, again, we're talking about dehydrating, running. So when you run, especially long distances, your body diverts blood away from your internal organs into your muscles where it's needed to get the oxygen. So mainly the body diverts blood away from the gut. And so that's what people get when they, the so-called runner's trots, or they get bleeding afterwards. That's because the gut is not getting enough blood supply and you're getting a little ischemia there. Well, things like NSAIDs like Advil and Aleve can make that much worse. And so I'm not a big fan of those, but you could definitely use some of the gel pads and things to help. Big thing is, though, if you're having really, really sharp pain when you run, it may not be a Morton's neuroma, and it may be a stress fracture, and you may want to get that checked out.
Yeah, there's not a lot of living with pain and running. Those things that train does not last very long. Like just being in pain and running through the pain, it's been on our myth show, that's been very debunked as a successful training method. And so it really is about what you can do to maybe get through Saturday, and then who you need to talk to figure out what is the underlying cause. Because we can only treat symptoms for so long before the underlying cause flares up in a more robust way. Especially with foot pain, we tend to favor the other leg more, or we tend to shift how we run, and you really don't want to be changing your overall mechanics for discomfort in the foot. So getting that addressed as soon as possible. And good luck with your run, Amber. All right, let's see who else we have. All right, Lee says, I've had twinge ache in the back of the right calf since the last 10K a couple of days ago. Gastroc sprain, they think. How do I make sure I don't aggravate it when I stretch or during the half? I'm so happy we have you on, James. What do you think?
So I mean, it's very possible if you do have some twinge or tightness back there, you could have a slight muscle strain. And certainly, static stretch, you want to stay away from too much static stretching with those, because we know that static stretching on acute strains can actually make them worse, especially if you push past pain. So again, you want to kind of stretch it to the point of pain, but don't try to push past the pain. But that's where a dynamic stretch is great. They're great for these kind of strains. So like that, doing some calf raises, moving your ankle around and getting full motion there. I'm a big fan of lunge with a lumbar twist. That's like my favorite dynamic stretch because it's really a full body stretch and it kind of incorporates everything. So things like that. And if doing those dynamic things, you're having pain, that may be a signal to you that you're just not ready to run. If doing those simple motions for dynamic causes pain, then trying to run 13 miles is probably not going to last, and that muscle's probably going to give way on you.
Yeah, just run smart, and sometimes running smart and being, an advocate for yourself means knowing when to call it, right? And it happens all the time. All runners go through it. I pulled out of a half marathon a couple weeks ago, and I'm in less pain because of it. So it really is about, knowing, it's like Kenny Rogers, know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. So let Kenny Rogers be your guide, and sometimes you need to know when to walk away. All right, let's see what else we have here. Amber, any tips for dealing with lingering chest congestion from a cold?
So that is a common problem. As runners, there is some data that shows that runners kind of are more prone to get some upper respiratory infections and things like that, and so that can be a kind of common problem. Certainly you can take some of the decongestants and things like that to kind of help, but I would tell you in our current environment, if you have symptoms of cold, probably shouldn't be around people because you're probably contagious. Now, if you've had them for weeks, weeks and, you're over most of the illness, but you just got a lingering cough, that's not uncommon. Some of these viruses can cause cough that lasts for like 4 to 5 weeks afterwards. So taking, you can take some cough medicine or something to kind of help, but also staying well hydrated. That's another thing. So getting well hydrated helps break up some of that mucus and thin it out so that your body can get it out better. And again, be careful, because if you're having some congestion, having some trouble breathing, definitely tailor back your pace, go a little slower, take it slow. The good thing about a half marathon is you can always start slow and see how you feel. And if you get to mile 7 and you're like, I feel great, that I'm going too slow, then you can pick up the pace. If you start too fast at mile 2, there's only so much you can do to slow down.
Oh, we talked about this during the course strategy. This is a perfect course for starting slow, and then at mile 7, slight downhill all the way to the ocean. So it's really behooves you to hang back, and then if by, all good things that happen, you feel like you want to go on Ocean Parkway, then by all means, have a good day and go for it. But you only get there especially in the weather we're going to have, by being conservative in your running approach, hanging back, and really taking care of yourself. Hydrating, knowing when to fold, stretching in the corrals, just being really generous with your body and being very kind. Now, runners, we're coming down to our last questions, so if you have any more, please drop them in the chat. We would love to answer them, but let's see what else we have from our runners. Arthur asks, how would you recommend preventing or dealing with cramping on race day?
So that's always a question we get a lot. And muscle cramps are not well understood. So let's first of all say that. If you got the old coach that told you, it's all about dehydration, that is not true. We do think that hydration plays a role, but we also think muscle fatigue plays a big role. And there are certain people that are more prone to cramping, maybe from just genetics, the way their muscles are composed. But so certainly staying well hydrated, again, hydration starts now. So making sure you're well hydrated before your race, making sure your muscles are warmed up. So again, we talked about a dynamic stretching. Tight, not warmed up muscles are going to be more prone to strain and things like that. And especially on hot days, you definitely want to get some of those electrolytes in because you're losing them, So the old adage of it's always an electrolyte problem is probably not true, but there is some role for electrolytes, certainly especially helping with dehydration. If you do feel like, let's say you're on the course, let's say you're on mile 12 and you start to feel a little tightness in that calf, then, kind of walking a little bit, really trying to that is a role for static stretching. So when a muscle is cramping, doing a little bit of static stretching can help take the cramp out. Again, you want to go to the point of pain, but don't try to push past pain. And then slowing down, kind of seeing how it feels, giving it some time to recover. And then as it starts to feel better, you may be able to get back into running, or you may not be able to, and you may kind of have to walk the rest of the time. The ultimate goal of these races is to finish. So, so if you start getting cramping and you have to walk the rest of the race in order to get across the finish line, then that's fine,
I love how you're answering these questions with so much scientific nuance, which I think often gets lost in conversations. Someone's like, eat a banana. And you're like, maybe, sure, I need potassium at some point, but there's a lot of other factors that come into these, physiological things that are happening that sometimes we don't have a super clear picture of. So I love saying that it could be a lot of different things, and here's how you can handle it. And if it keeps happening, definitely work with a primary. If it gets really painful, if it's you can't run anymore because of it, you can elevate it to your doctors and figure out what's going on. But sometimes you can just, sometimes you've just run a half marathon and your body is uncomfortable and you need to walk for a little bit, and we fully endorse that as well. So take care of yourselves, runners. All right, let's see what else we have. Eric asks, would you discourage doing several 400-meter repeats today at target half marathon pace? So just put this in context, it is Thursday. Our race is on Saturday, so this is 2 days out. Do you have feelings about 400 meters?
I think doing a few is okay. I mean, really, the couple days before the race is when I recommend rest, So now's not the time to push your training. If you haven't done your training by now, it's too late. But you can do a little bit, to keep your muscles loose and things like that, but you definitely don't want to fatigue your muscles. So delayed onset muscle soreness, which is what happens after muscles exercise for a long time, is worse at 48 hours. So that 8 to 72 hours is really the worst time for delayed onset muscle soreness. So if you fatigue your muscles today, then they're going to be sore and they're going to be tight on Saturday. So I really, today is the day to kind of rest, do some dynamic stretching, just take it easy. You don't want to just sit on the couch all day because you want your muscles to move, but you definitely don't want to exert them at this point in time.
Yeah, if you're looking to do anything a little bit up-tempo, 100 meters. If you're looking to go for an easy jog and you need to move and you really just hate being static, doing 100 meters at the pace is more appropriate, I'd say, than a 400. You can fatigue at 400 meters. I know it's your half marathon pace, but it can be enough that you are sort of exhausting yourself and not getting the benefit. There's no benefit to that this close to the race. So if you want to do something a little up-tempo, maybe 4 by 100 meters, you open it up, you feel good, but you're not getting that fatigue that James is talking about, which you totally just need to avoid right now. And sometimes it's hard to. Everyone's excited. They want to optimize performance. They want to have the best race. They're looking to sneak everything into their training. There is a tipping point. And I love how you identified that tipping point. You don't want to be doing anything today that 48 hours, which is called race day, you would be feeling the effects of. So Eric, take it really easy, something very light, and then bring down the distance. If you are looking for something more up-tempo, bring it back to like 100 meters, something that you can recover from, and just a couple of them. Because there's nothing to really be gained, but a lot to be lost in 2 days before a race. So you want to keep it nice and easy. Now, we got some more questions. All right, Jess. Will there be cooling towels on the course and or at the finish to help cool down the runners? Now, I know we're going to have our water stations. We have a lot of them on the course. In years past, we've been able to open up. I remember one year as a staffer, I stood under, I was assigned to stand under the hydration spraying machine that was on the boardwalk. It's fun if you're a runner. It was a little long if you were a staffer who had to stand exactly at that spot. So there will be hydration, and I think we are working for ways to keep our runners cool. I don't want to say there's exactly going to be a fire hydrant open every block, but we are going to have more stations that are going to be providing sprays, definitely tons of water. So while it's important to have, James, I'd love your thoughts on this too, trying to be cooling your external temperature, ingesting, that sounds like drinking water, as it's also called, is really what's going to help your body be able to cool down as well. Your body is trying to maintain homeostasis. It is trying to figure out how to get itself into neutral, keep its core temp down. Yes, you can think about putting water on the skin, but also drinking water is very helpful for your body's function on that. James, what are your thoughts on that?
No, that's perfect because it's all about getting cooling internally. So, you want to drink lots of water, drink. Now you can over drink water, but on a hot day like that's going to be Saturday, you really want to hydrate well. And in drinking that cool water, we always see people like pouring water on themselves, which definitely helps cool you off, but for a few moments, maybe a minute, and then all that water evaporates. But you definitely want to cool the internal temperature. Now there are various towels and things that you can get that do. When you wet them, kind of give a cooling sensation, and you can put those like around your neck and things if you are feeling hot. Obviously, if you're feeling abnormally, you think that there's something wrong, like you feel hot, you're starting to get dizzy, maybe you're getting a little confused, it's time to stop. It's time to go to one of the medical tents where you can get ice bags and really cool down. Heat exhaustion can be a huge problem, and it can be very, very dangerous. So it's not something to ever try to run through or push through.
And we have amazing medical staff. We've got amazing medical tents. They are the nicest people. I'm about to say I spent a lot of time in there, like it's like a bar I hung out in. No, I've been to a lot of our medical tents, and they are staffed by exceptionally kind people who want to help. And so if you don't know, it's one of those things, in doubt, ask the medical staff in the tents. Go over and say, I'm feeling these things. What do you think, right? And they'll be able to say and help you identify symptoms. And they'd be like, they will tell you, like, you've just been running in a hot weather. Or they'll be able to say, you need to stop. This is some signs of more dangerous temperatures. So you really, we have a lot of experts on this course, whether it's in our recovery tent with HSS at the finish, or whether it's our medical staff along the route. Don't hesitate to use that. That is part of the services we provide to you, the runners. So ask people. You don't have to go it alone. No pain, no gain is not our mantra here. It really is about making sure you are a healthy, happy runner and you know all the resources provided to you. So love that. Do we have another question? Any tips? I love this question so much. Any tips to keep sweat out of the eyes? I use a hat and Vaseline above my eyebrow. Any other methods that you know of? James, you are an avid runner. We were talking about your marathons and your half marathons and all the running you've been doing. What are your go-to tips for this?
I may try those. Those actually sound pretty good. Usually I've got like a headband or something like that, just trying to keep the sweat out of your eyes. It can be a hard problem, especially like tomorrow Saturday the sun may be pretty intense, so we may even have sunscreen on, and then you got your sweating, and then the sunscreen gets in your eyes. So anything you can do to just keep a barrier over there that may absorb the sweat. And then remember that that's going to get wet, and then it's not going to do its job. So, at one of the water stations, you may need to stop and wring it out. And, but the Vaseline trick I've never tried, but that sounds like maybe it's a pretty good idea.
I also have never tried that. We might have to have this person who's an expert in sweat as well. I haven't heard that. I do love, my preferred one is a tech fabric hat. Sometimes people wear cotton baseball hats, and those trap heat close to your head, and they absorb all the sweat and all the water. So I love sometimes tech fabric hats, and sometimes if you are a heavy sweater, they have a built-in like little sweatband that goes right across the forehead, and that can sometimes help as well. But it sounds like you're maxing out on the expert tips. So if anybody else has any ways to keep sweat out of the eyes, let us know in the chat. We'd love to do some group think on this as well. Now we actually have some more questions. I love that y'all are talking to us today. Thanks for this, runners. Lena asks, are salt packets enough for electrolytes, or is magnesium necessary before and during the race?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That's a actually really good question. So we know, we've always hit on sodium and salt. And then lately we've been coming more into calcium, potassium, magnesium, that they do play a large role in muscle function. And so could people need to supplement those? I don't know that there's any data that says that supplements help that. Certainly, you could try them. I would not try magnesium on race day. Magnesium often causes diarrhea as a side effect, so not something you want to try for the first time on a race day. But if you're used to taking magnesium, then that's fine. Salt packets are great. I mean, like if you're at mile 11 and you're feeling a little dehydrated, then just taking one of those McDonald's salt packets and pouring it on your tongue, you realize how much salt you're missing, because your body it won't even taste salty. Like you won't even notice that you're eating full salt, and that lets you know that your body's telling you need electrolytes, because it's wanting you to take those in. So either that, or doing it through the electrolyte replacement drinks. There's the goos, the gels. Again, though, my thing is, don't try anything on race day that you haven't tried before. So, if you're thinking of, oh, I haven't really been doing those things because I've been training during the winter, then you could try those things today. Go get some, find out what we're using at the race on Saturday. Maybe go get some and just try them and see how your stomach feels with them. Because some of those things do cause, for some people, they definitely irritate the stomach, and not something you want to have happen on race day.
Yeah, and they're very concentrated, like intentionally concentrated. You're not going to sit down and have a meal at during the race, and so they're intentionally concentrated. And check out the ingredients. If you're super curious and you want to know what they have, you can see brand by brand what electrolytes are in there, and what I can't say vitamins and minerals. What you're working with, and you can become sort of an expert in your own right on this if it's something that you're curious about, which sounds like you are. We also have around 6.8 miles into the race our friend Science and Sport. So there is a gel station, but you can go to the pre-party today and you can try the gels that will be available on course. It's always good to do that. 6.8 miles is not the time to experiment with something you have not had before. It would be like going into a restaurant, running 6 miles, and then being like, I'll take that food I've never eaten. It's akin to that. You really want to know that you like the taste of it, that you like how it sits in your stomach. So even just trying it today is a good thing to do, or going with what works. And if you're looking at this like, what are you two even talking about in terms of electrolytes? Even having something like Gatorade, which is featured at every station, is something that, many of us have had that. We know we like it. We know we can digest it. You can have Gatorade and then do water at the next one, and then Gatorade at the next one. And that's an easy way if you don't have the bells and whistles of any other supplements to take. You can also get some electrolytes in as well. So I think we have a couple more. I love y'all giving us these questions. All right. Should I avoid cross-training and high-intensity interval training tomorrow with HIIT? You go, I go. I feel like we got the same answer.
My answer would be absolutely. High-intensity training is made to fatigue your muscles. That's the point of it. It's made to be very high intensity in a short interval to maximize your heart rate. That is going to fatigue your muscles, and it is not going to help you on race day. Now, doing like a stationary bike or something at a very, very mild pace, kind of just getting moving, like we talked about. Keeping your muscles moving, but you don't want to fatigue them. You don't want them to work hard. Now is not the time. Now is not the time to get in shape or get your heart rate down. It's just, it's too late for those things. Now, high intensity training I do think is very helpful for runners. I think that especially even long distance runners where you don't really get your heart rate into those high levels with long distance running. They can be very helpful. They can increase speed and things like that. It's been shown in performance stuff. But also, those are also hard on your tendons and your joints and your bones and your muscles as well. So if you're ramping up and doing like a ramp up, like you're training for a half marathon, that's not, to me, that's not really the time to do the high intensity training. That's more in the off when you're not training, when you're just doing your maintenance runs and things like that.
What he said. So I can't even, there's nothing else I can add. I think I'm going to start putting out a recommended list of things we can do, like the day before the race, like walk your dog, take a nap, go for an easy 2-mile jog, like recommended activities. And it also depends on your level of activity yourself. So if you're somebody who does a lot of bike riding, maybe a gentle bike ride through your neighborhood is something that will not fatigue you at all. That would fatigue me. I'm not a cyclist. So it really is doing stuff that you're really comfortable with and optimizing the window right before your training by not doing that much. Really, it seems counterintuitive, but really, you know, the week before your race, really letting your body and its energy stores fill all the way up and avoid that muscle fatigue. All right, let's see who else we've got. Lena, thoughts on using infrared sauna to relax muscles? I feel like Lena has got these like really great questions that are like really sciencey. So go for it.
So I actually do like you. I think that there is some role for heat, especially when it comes to relaxing muscles and maybe post-exercise. Again, it's not time to do that now because obviously those things dehydrate you, and it's more important to stay hydrated. But yes, incorporating it into your regular exercise routine, your regular running routine, certainly there is some data that can help loosen muscles back up after they're tight. That may allow you to do some static stretching that kind of helps. You know, either that or like a wet heat, such, you know, like a steam room or things like that after exercise can help. You know, there's also a lot about cryo and, you know, how much cryo really works. Certainly there is some data that cryo can prevent delayed onset muscle soreness. So, you know, using an ice bath or things like that. I really think that that's probably more, you know, for athletes that are having short turnaround time. So like our NBA athletes, or I'm a team physician for the New York Liberty, and so for our WNBA athletes, that they may have a game and then they may have a game the next day, and so ice baths and things like that can definitely help prevent delayed onset muscle soreness, so they can turn around a little quicker. For long distance runners, I don't think is as important.
Absolutely, I love it. I like your side job a lot. It's very cool. I was reading up on that. I was like, that's pretty cool. Anyway, all right, let's see. Jess, what are some signs of heat stroke? Love this question. What does it look like when it's happening? Yeah,
so certainly some of the early signs can be muscle cramps, you know, feeling hot. I mean, like that. When you start getting overheated, initially you're going to feel it, and it's not just I'm out in the sun and I feel hot. Like you will notice it kind of as a difference. And then actually it's the opposite of what you would think about. You start to stop sweating, so you're not sweating anymore. Your skin actually kind of feels cold and clammy. It doesn't feel hot. That's a warning sign. That's bad. If you start to get dizzy, lightheaded, you know, blurry vision, and especially if you start to get confused, you know, like you're kind of like, I don't remember the last mile, you know, those kind of things. Those are some warning signs you definitely want to get checked out. Obviously, you know, you sometimes will see runners kind of stumble. You know, they'll start to kind of weave back and forth and they won't be able to run straight anymore. That's something that you may see in another runner that may want to say, maybe I should get this person some help or alert the medical people about this person. And then, you know, and then if you continue on, then collapse happens. And that's what we want to prevent. That's what we don't want to happen.
And James, heat exhaustion comes before heat stroke. And so heat exhaustion is also sort of like this introduction, you know, so if you start having these, there's symptoms before and to lesser degree that might not be as severe. And we're hoping you never have these severe symptoms anytime you run, right? And I think as runners, we have to confront the reality that we're going to be running in all conditions. And we love running. And so it might mean running in very cold conditions or running very hot. So this is stuff that runners should just know. And so heat exhaustion, and correct me if I'm wrong, preempts heat stroke in many ways. And what is that? What does sort of the entry level symptoms look like?
Yeah, so you are correct. Heat exhaustion is first and then heat stroke. And so you can have some of the same early symptoms, you know, like the feeling hot, you know, feeling a little dizzy, the cold, clammy skin kind of things. Basically, what heat stroke is when your body can no longer compensate. Your temperature's gotten so high that you're starting to do damage to your organs because your body can't compensate for that heat anymore. And obviously that's what we want to avoid. So when you start to feel those heat exhaustion symptoms, maybe muscle cramps, feeling hot, sometimes you're even not thirsty anymore. Your body, it's kind of all the opposite things. Your body's starting to not do the things that normally would help it compensate, not sweat, those kind of things. It's time, that's when you want to stop, because that's when you can cool down, and usually you have no problems. You can kind of cool down, you recover, and things go well.
All right. Well, let's get to our next question. Martina, would the race ever be canceled due to heat? So I think with the New York runners, the health and safety of our runners is always paramount. We don't like to hold unsafe events. Like, that's just who we are. I really worked here 7 years, and I appreciate the organization being willing to cancel events when they're unsafe, especially during the pandemic and other times. So I would never say never. There's a lot of steps that happen before an event is canceled, including changing all the health and safety protocols and really going into, we have flag systems that indicate conditions. So you can keep a lookout for our flag system, which is also on our website, and it would be communicated to you. So you and I have all the same information, which the race is on and it's happening, and we're asking runners to be really safe. We're also increasing our water stations and making sure we have optimal services for our runners. And if it got communicated to you, we would let you know. And that includes for adverse weather conditions. That includes, a variety of things, not just the heat. So we are always super wanting to have the safest events possible. So we would let you know if it were canceled, and it's not. So thanks for that. Kasey asks, how soon is too soon to get a massage after a race?
I think it's according to what type of massage that you're talking about. So certainly, as soon as you're done racing, you can get a massage. The question is, what's the goal of that massage? So a massage right after a race should just be muscle recovery. So it should be very gentle, gentle stretching, gentle kind of just movement of the muscle. This is not the time that you're going to work out those kinks or things like that. That's not the time to do that. So, that type of more like a full body, what we're traditionally used to when we go to like a spa and get a massage, that when, where they're really working the muscles and trying to work out those kinks, I would probably say, you may want to wait a week or so, let those muscles really recover before you do something like that.
Well, James, that is it for our questions. You have been the most fun to have on the show. So much good expertise here. I love when we have our runners and our HSS experts are also runners, because there's the lived experience and also just the experience from the medical community. So thank you so much for joining us at the show.
Thank you for having me, and good luck to everybody running on Saturday.
Good luck, runners. We are so excited to see you out there, and thanks for joining us.